He's got some great photographs here.
Yeah, there's even more.
That's on 26. There's the grain elevator and stuff in Russiaville. You can stay, that elevator's still there.
April 11th, 1965. How old were you?
I was 8 years old at the time.
What do you remember about that day?
I remember that it was an unusually warm day, a very balmy day. We played outside with our shirts off that day. It was so unseasonably warm early in the day.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any forewarning with those warm temperatures that something might be afoot weather-wise, or were you just taking it, hey, it's a nice spring day?
Not until later in the evening, and as we looked toward the west, the sky had a very greenish-yellow hue to it, and later it began hailing and very, very heavy rain. We lived east of Kokomo, and the electricity went out. And of course, we weren't aware at that time that a tornado was ripping across Howard County.
Mm-hmm. What time of evening was this?
I'm going to say around 7 p.m.
Okay.
Typically, it would be time for the kids to get called in and get cleaned up and get your baths and those sort of things. So I remember that it was just a great day because it was early in the spring and it was unseasonably warm.
Mm-hmm.
One of those days where you're just glad you know winter's over and spring and summer can't be far behind.
What do you vividly remember about the storm itself?
I remember that I really can't recall seeing that cast to the sky before then, and it somewhat alarmed my mother and father because it was so distinct, and it was definitely to the west, and then the hail came down, and it was, at that time, it was the largest hail that I had ever seen, and a lot of rain and lightning, and then just the total pitch darkness, lighting the candles, and obviously going to bed without any television or electricity wasn't a real common event. But again, we had no idea that what was occurring in Howard County at the time.
How large was the hail, would you say?
I can recall golf ball sized hail.
Mm-hmm. So as an 8-year-old boy, were you fascinated by all of this when it was occurring? Were you scared, or what was the feeling going through your head?
I was somewhat scared due to the cast of the sky. Like I say, I had not seen that before, and obviously hail being a rather rare event too. We moved east of Kokomo in 1965, not too long before the tornadoes occurred, and so living in town, the lights never went out, and like I say, out in the county, the electricity went out and never got reestablished that evening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as an 8-year-old, I'd say I was at a minimum uneasy. You might even call it frightened, a little bit scared. Of course, Mom and Dad are around, so 8-year-olds are never that scared when Pop's there and Mom's there.
Yeah. When did you first learn about the devastating tornadoes?
The next morning, my mother got us up and told us that a tornado had struck the county, and of course we still didn't have any electricity. Told us that it was a bad storm and that it had apparently killed people, and that I had an uncle's house that was damaged between Alto and Russiaville, and that we were going to get in the car and check it out ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So when you took to the roads with your family, what did you encounter?
I just remember seeing the incredible devastation as we headed west through the community of Alto and towards Russiaville. I can also remember very distinctly farm animals laying dead in a field that actually had boards impaled completely through these animals, and of course I'd never seen destruction like that live in person, and it was really hard for I think for an 8-year-old to conceive what had actually caused this sort of devastation and damage. And then when we got into Russiaville, it was unbelievable. I mean, the town was just gone, and there were some folks and firefighters and people in the street collecting money. Traffic was moving very slow. Even though it didn't seem like we had any idea what happened before, I think it appeared the whole world must have known the next day, because large lines of traffic, large lines of sightseers, and of course, being in law enforcement today, I don't appreciate those sightseers, but I think everybody wanted to see firsthand the devastation and the destruction. And as I remember, when we were waiting in line, I don't recall any cars in front of us where they didn't put something into the fireman's boot.
Yeah.
I think we realized it later that same day. The electricity was not reestablished for a number of days. There were also, as we traveled down Washington Street, the Kokomo Tribune attempted to publish a newspaper, and basically what they had done was took a mimeograph machine, a hand crank mimeograph machine, and tried to put together the best information that they could. And newsboys were hawking that mimeographed edition of the Kokomo Tribune in the street there at Defunct in Washington, and I think they were selling them for a nickel. And my dad bought a copy, and they had some names listed of the dead. And I think even though we were rather young, we realized we'd never really been experienced an event of that magnitude that had such an effect on our local community.
Mm-hmm. When did you actually see photos of the tornadoes per se? What was the first image that you remember?
The first image that I can remember seeing was when newspapers, when we were finally able to purchase a regular newspaper, Paul Huffman's famous photograph of the twin tornadoes that struck near Elkhart, of course, was published worldwide. And I remember seeing that image, and of course, when you look at it, you get the distinct impression that those two monster funnels are moving directly towards you. And of course, later, as I grew older, and kind of was interested in that type of weather phenomena, I learned that those were moving from left to right in the photograph, so it wasn't like they were coming directly towards him. But it's it's a frightening picture to look at, and I don't remember any pictures being published of the tornado that struck Howard County. I can't remember seeing any pictures of that tornado until later, when the Kokomo Morning Times put out their special edition, which there are a number of those in circulation, and a number of folks here in Howard County that still have those newspapers that have been passed on from generation to generation.
That photo, I mean, I have that newspaper myself. The one taken from the roof of the Kokomo Morning Times looking towards Alto, that was taken in Kokomo, looking right over here, because I drove through Alto on the way up here. I pretty much came up the path of this tornado. That was
taken on the south end of Kokomo. If you would be on 31, there would be a Grindstone Charlie's and a Ruby Tuesday restaurant, and the Kokomo Morning Times building was located right there in that area. There's a Grindstone Charlie, a Taco Bell, and a Ruby Tuesday, and a Donato's Pizza, and there's also a Sunspot Foods, and the Kokomo Morning Times was right there where that Sunspot Foods building is located.
As you grew older and became involved in law enforcement and interested in severe weather awareness. Did you talk to anyone from around the area about witnessing these tornadoes by any chance? What other people might have seen that night?
Well, I've attended some seminars. When I was a state police officer, we put on some severe weather seminars along with the Howard County EMA, and of course I met Mr. Ike Hollingsworth, who was the Russiaville volunteer fire chief at the time, and Mr. Hollingsworth recalled the events that occurred that evening. Also, the Howard County Historical Society had a 40-year anniversary, and I think the most amazing thing to me was at that event, some people wept that were very, very close to the disaster, that either lost loved ones or property, or discovered that their friends lost their lives, and 40 years had passed, and they were still emotional about the events that had occurred that evening. So it's had a malingering effect in the communities where it struck.
Mm-hmm. How did this event affect you per se, growing up?
Well, I think after witnessing it firsthand, I've always been kind of fascinated by the phenomena, but I've also taken it very seriously. And time erases memories, unpleasant memories, and the Palm Sunday tornadoes for many people are a distant memory, or they weren't alive during the time period when it happened. And I don't think Indiana has experienced such an event since, and with the magnitude of these storms, the outbreak of '74 may have come close, but again, we know that this event will occur again, and hopefully we're better prepared to deal with it, to get the warning out, to handle the aftermath should it occur. But I think witnessing that firsthand as an 8-year-old has left a keen awareness of what can happen, and that we do live in Tornado Alley. If April 11, 1965 were to occur today, we would immediately respond with better capabilities today than we have had in the past. A couple of pictures that I recall from 1965, they were pleading for people with station wagons and pickup trucks to haul victims to hospitals. Today we have a much better EMS system. We have much better emergency management organization. We have access to a number of Lifeline type helicopters, medevac helicopters. We have a reserve sheriff's component, and I think we would be much better equipped to respond today to a disaster of that magnitude than the response that took place in 1965. And I have those folks that did the rescues and worked for days on end without sleep, did the best that they could under the circumstances, but I truly feel that we would be much better prepared to cope with the disaster of that magnitude today. I remember that it was an unusually warm day, a very balmy day. We played outside with our shirts off that day.
I just remember that the skies looked horrible.
It was April 11th, 1965, just after 7 p.m. The first tornado hit south of Lafayette. At 7:20 p.m., the second formed south of Crawfordsville, cutting a mile-wide swath of devastation through Lebanon, Sheridan, and Arcadia. 28 people were killed. The third and most violent twister formed 5 minutes later west of Russiaville. Howard County Sheriff Marty Talbert was 8 years old, living with his family east of Kokomo.
As we looked toward the west, the sky had a very greenish-yellow hue. Of course, we weren't aware at that time that a tornado was ripping across Howard County.
In minutes, the funnel destroyed 90% of Russiaville. 3 people were killed, caught off guard by the rapidly moving storm.
When we got into Russaville, it was unbelievable. I mean, the town was just gone.
Trees shredded, homes demolished, livestock killed. The mile-wide twister moved across the countryside at nearly 60 miles per hour. People in Alto, Greentown, and Marion were also caught unaware.
I don't recall seeing any warnings that day.
You can go out and look at the skies, and when it's that greenish cast and it's hot, too hot, and you know the conditions, you soon instinctively know the conditions for tornado generation.
Today we have a much better EMS system. We have much better emergency management, and I think we would be much better equipped to respond today to a disaster of that magnitude than the response that took place in 1965.
The event not only twisted its way into the record books, but also spawned new public awareness. Modern-day watches, warnings, storm spotter networks, and the Fujita scale of tornado damage intensity all grew out of the Palm Sunday tornadoes of 1965. Lake Naftel, News Channel 18.